Did you know? Studies show that approximately 70% of all smokers in the United States alone want to stop this self destructive habit that is smoking. More than half of these do their best attempts to quit, but only 6% have been successful. In a different study, 64% of people who have been diagnosed with cancer would rather live with this dangerous habit, even if it endangers their lives. Of course, smoking is the one habit that is almost close to impossible to quit. But it is not impossible. In fact, this refusal to quit self destructive habits isn't only seen in smoking but in other habits as well. For instance, have you ever had a terrible habit that you know you should quit, but you cannot do it? It doesn't have to be smoking again, it can be playing video games, watching Netflix for very long times, watching pornography, etc. It can be extremely frustrating to quit a habit or even an addiction, right? However, why can't you seem to give it up even when you know it's not the best thing for you? Well, this video will explain to you why we do habits that are bad for us, how addictions works, and how to stop it. Introducing dopamine, the agent that drives our behaviors. You may not realize it, but dopamine plays a significant aspect in our lives. It is a hormone that is responsible for making us happy. It is a complex neurotransmitter that gives us motivation, attention, and is also responsible for our decision making. In fact, dopamine is not bad, it is quite the opposite actually. Dopamine is what enters our brain when we are scrolling through our Instagram feed or when we are working out. It is the feel good neurotransmitter that enters our brain and it affects the way we behave and act. Along with hormones such as serotonin and endorphins, dopamine is responsible for making us feel good with ourselves, and it is why it can be addicting. It affects our mood, focus, behavior, and the decisions we make every day. The only downside with dopamine is when we people overdose on it, or when people are so desperate in that feel good feeling that is dopamine is able to provide. In fact, it is one of the most prominent transmitters that affects our behavior. We experience dopamine every day with even the simplest pleasures of our daily lives, such as drinking coffee, watching a movie, or even consuming food. When this happens, our brain links a feeling of pleasure with dopamine, and in return, it creates a reward system. For instance, you are drinking a coffee in the morning, and this makes you feel good through dopamine. Your brain thinks that is a reward system, and you constantly long for that pleasure drinking coffee gives you. Even if it may not be the healthiest choice, it is the neurotransmitter known as a motivator to do things repeatedly. Do you ever wonder why you get hooked into watching that Netflix show you love so much? Or why can you spend hours playing your favorite video game? Dopamine has everything to do with that. Since dopamine makes us feel good, you constantly long for that happy and blissful feeling. In the same sense, this is why people who lack dopamine in their system tend to be more prone to addictions and unhealthy habits such as drinking or smoking. Whether we realize it or not, we crave dopamine in our everyday lives. I mean, who wouldn't want to have that constant feel good feeling every day? However, when you depend on dopamine too much, it can be addicting. By completely reducing or even cutting off dopamine for just a day, this can restart your brain and your thinking. On a daily basis, we indulge ourselves with distractions such as Netflix, video games, and other things that make us feel good. The problem with this is that it is not necessarily good for us. Let's say video games, for example. Video games is completely entertaining and keeps you on edge as you are playing, but it is not exactly a healthy habit. When addicted, video games can make you lose your productivity and motivation. It may act as the perfect escape from reality, but It is not a healthy habit to have. But why do people get addicted to video games even when it is not good for us? The answer has everything to do with dopamine again. This neurotransmitter that makes us feel good is why we are so hooked on checking our phones as soon as we wake up, or why we go after our comfort food when we are not feeling good. Since we get daily dose of dopamine, we crave for it the moment it is gone. As mentioned, dopamine is not bad. It is also what drives us to make certain decisions and it becomes a motivation. However, because we are so used to constantly having dopamine, these can disrupt our daily lives. The worst part is, too much of dopamine can become an addiction, and it is what causes you to become addicted to something in the first place. Too much of dopamine is what causes unhealthy habits and addictions that ruin our life. The things that are responsible for making us feel good act as an escape so we don't have to think about our problems, our goals, and the very outcome of our lives. Dopamine acts as our escape. That is exactly what makes it addicting and captivating. Dopamine isn't what is bad, but the abuse of pleasure that we do is what is bad. For instance, spending an hour or two playing video games is not necessarily bad. However, spending 5 or 6 hours of playing video games every single day can be really bad and have very negative consequences. You are longing for that pleasure it gives you. This is where dopamine detox comes in the picture. As we have mentioned earlier, abusing dopamine is what causes addictions and unhealthy habits. By doing a 24-hour dopamine detox, you'd be getting rid of all the sources of dopamine you have, and this will reset your brain. Basically, you cannot do anything that makes you feel good. You cannot drink coffee, eat, watch movies, play video games, smoke, having sex, nothing. You cannot use your phone and you cannot even talk in extreme cases. The only things that you can do are drink water, meditate, write, go for long walks. You have to do this for an entire 24 hours. In a dopamine detox, this begins right the moment you wake up, right until you go sleep. The purpose of this is to have no dopamine at all for one day, and that's why there's more things you cannot do rather than the things you can do. Basically, you need to avoid all forms of pleasure at all cost. You may ask yourself, isn't that too much? That is too hard to do? Well, exactly. It's because it is too hard, it's going to become very effective. If you think going in a full dopamine detox is too hard, maybe you start small, like do not look at your phone for 24 hours, or do not eat for 24 hours, or pick one area. But again, ideally you have to go on a full dopamine detox. Some people do it on a weekly basis, some people do it once a month. It's all up to you and how much you commit to change in your lives. The longer you do it or the more you go into it, the more change you will have in your life. What makes a dopamine detox effective in overcoming a certain habit is it resets your brain, because you went through an entire day without that feel-good feeling. You are forced to sit through your emotions, even your darkest and most uncomfortable emotions. Are you aware that what causes addictions in the first place, aside from overconsumptions of dopamine, is you are trying to escape from your pain? With a dopamine detox, you are forced to sit with your emotions for an entire day, with absolutely no forms of escape to help you. The only thing you have during a dopamine detox is to write your thoughts and your feelings and meditation. Whenever you feel your emotions, you can run away from them. Instead, you feel it and you can write down your thoughts. A dopamine detox forces you to sit down with your emotions and feel them instead of running away from them. By doing this, you are able to address your problems that needs to be addressed and actually do something about it. The reason why people tend to run to habits such as smoking, drinking, or even drugs is to mask this pain. When you address your problem in a dopamine detox, once it is over, you are able to acknowledge your feelings in a much healthier way. In a dopamine detox, writing and meditation are two things that would be your best friends. Writing would help you to acknowledge all the problems as they are and come up with solutions to overcome these problems. Meditation, on the other hand, helps you to feel calmer and more peaceful with your thoughts. Meditation helps you to master the art of thinking your thoughts and letting them go away. After all of this, you are probably wondering, how would this help you stop your habits of smoking or any other destructive habits? By doing a dopamine detox, you balance out your life from being overexposed to pleasure and other things that feel good. In addition, you are able to sit down with your thoughts and actually feel them instead of escaping them. Through this, you'll find that you have more motivation in quitting smoking. The day after a dopamine detox ends, your productivity and motivation levels are back to normal. Chances are you'll be able to quit the habit you've always wanted to quit after a dopamine detox. You will no longer spend all of your time playing video games, and you'll be aware of the amount of dopamine you expose yourself to in a daily basis.